it's Gina, and I am back with day 2 of the Lupus and Chronic Illness Awareness Challenge. And for today's discussion, we're going to be talking about, or I'm going to be talking about, how lupus and chronic illness has affected my life. So for this topic, I'm going to talk about ways that lupus and chronic illness has affected my life. And there are quite a few areas that I'm going to discuss, and they're not necessarily in any given order. And those will range from psychologically or emotionally, financially, physically, relationships wise, planning for the future, job, that sort of thing. So I am just going to dive right in. One of the huge ones for me to deal with on a daily basis, and I think probably for most of you, is what lupus and any kind of chronic illness does to your body physically. The main thing I would have to say is just being in pain all the time. Now, I would say prior to November of 2016, I had days that were really bad where I hurt all the time, but I also had really, really good days where I could do, pretty much anything, quote unquote, a normal person could do. But since November 8th, um, I have been in pain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the reason I mentioned November 8th is because that was the day that I had my hysterectomy. And for some reason, it triggered constant pain. So there is not a day that goes by since November 8th that I have any pain-free days. I do have ways that I manage it, but there isn't a day that I don't wake up in some kind of pain. Some days are excruciating pains, and other days they're tolerable. So physically, that has to be the toughest, um, the the toughest part of dealing with lupus and the other illnesses that I battle with. And it's not just the pain. A few years ago, I started putting on quite a bit of weight, and I might not look it, but if you went back to about 5 years ago, I was 112 pounds. And when I was diagnosed with neuropathy, I was started on gabapentin, which is or Neurontin, you might know it as by a different name. And it was basically to help with the peripheral neuropathy. But all the gabapentin did was pack on some weight. And I watched the scale get higher and higher and higher until I sort of plateaued at 142. And now I'm just gradually, very gradually, losing a couple pounds. But when you're used to being 112 pounds and the scale just keeps rising and rising, and don't get me wrong, I understand that there are some of you out there that have put on a lot of weight because of all of the medications that you're on. I'm not knocking that at all. I'm just speaking from my own perspective. That's what this challenge is about. So to see me go from 112 pounds, basically a size 3 most of the time, to 142 pounds, that was a huge shock for me. So the weight gain was one thing. The other thing that really affected me was hair loss. I went from having a full head of hair to watching my hair being, when I would comb it, I would literally get it out of my hand and just kind of, especially if I'm in the shower and I'm combing my hair, I would take it out of the comb and just flick it against the wall, and then at the end of the shower just gather it off the shower wall and just throw it away. So I would watch my hair fall out drastically until it got to a point where I had several bald spots, and I got to a point where I told my daughter, let's just cut it extremely short. And I got to about an inch in length, and I kept it that way until it gradually started to grow out. And but that took quite a long time and quite a bit of effort on my part to get it to grow again. So my daughter actually invested in a wig for me at Christmas. It's amazing. So I really enjoy that. So hair loss, weight gain, physical pain, photosensitivity is another one that I have to deal with. And this is going from somebody who grew up on two islands and practically lived in the sun. So to go from a sun loving person to having to take extreme care being out in the sun, putting on wide brim hats, making sure that I'm completely covered, tons of sunscreen, can't be out there for more than a few minutes at a time. That was definitely a major something major that I had to overcome, and I still deal with that on a daily basis. Right now, we're into spring, getting ready to go into summer, and being outside, that's where I want to be, but it's not going to happen too often because I've become quite allergic to the sun, or extremely sensitive to the sun, and I'm sure a lot of you can probably relate to that as well. Um, Another thing that I had to deal with as far as the physical, how lupus has affected me physically, is not being able to do the things that I typically would have done before. I went from being a cross country runner, a martial artist, to not being able to train because of the heart rate being an issue and just being in constant pain. Now, I did find that while I was training, the martial arts did help with the pain, but the reason why I had to stop is because of um, what's called exercise intolerance. And basically, within a few seconds, my heart rate would jump from 80 to 140. And most people, they work in the gym to get it to gradually go up to that. And mine literally does it in seconds. And for that to happen, it would jeopardize my life basically. So I had to stop training, and now I'm looking for other ways of getting some kind of physical activity other than just gardening. So the physical limitations is a huge deal for me because I'm used to being a very active person, and I've gone to barely being able to do anything, minimal housework. And even in that case, there are many times when I've asked friends to come in to help, because just doing housework like sweeping is exhausting. Folding laundry is exhausting. If I manage to get the laundry washed and get it taken into the dryer, brought back into the house, that's about it. That's all I can do. To sit there and try to complete the task of folding, that's the limit. So I basically have to plan my day. I do homeschool my youngest son, so that is takes up the majority of my day. But in between all of that, I'm trying to get a little bit of housework done here and there, and I do have to plan to where I am not exhausted within a few hours. I get up extremely early in the morning, and I will do some writing. I will do some painting, and then I get my son ready to do school. And usually by about 2:30, 3 o'clock, we're finished with school. He will start at about 10, but by around 2:30, 3 o'clock, I am so physically exhausted that all I can do after that is just relax. So the physical limitations is really a big deal when you're dealing with lupus and any kind of chronic illness. Um, Another huge thing is I'm gonna have to take a break right here. Whew, sorry, I had to take a break there. The shortness of breath is kind of getting to me just a little bit. Which brings me to the next physical limitation: fatigue. part of dealing with a chronic illness like lupus or any of the others like fibromyalgia, neuropathy, any of those, you get fatigued so easily. And it's just, when I say fatigue, I'm not talking, or tired, I'm not talking about your basic tired. I'm talking about so tired that getting up from the bed, walking about 10 feet is just exhausting. When I wake up in the morning, it takes me maybe 20 minutes to really get moving. I literally have to put myself into a frame of mind to get up out of bed. Then I have to get to the bathroom, and I have to sit down, do what I need to do, brush my teeth, wash my face, take a shower. Taking a shower itself is a major task. I really have to plan ahead for taking a shower. Um, right now I'm experiencing some shortness of breath, so but I'm going to um, push through the video because the video is about how chronic illness does affect your life. And this is a major part for me. If it does get too bothersome, then I will go ahead and stop and I'll pick up at another time. But this is one of the things I deal with on a daily basis, is the fatigue. The shortness of breath does come from having the lung problem, but part of it is also from the heart issue, because my heart beats so fast, and it's it's almost as if I've run a marathon or a long race, and that is what my heart is feeling like right now. It's like I've just finished this major race, but I really haven't done anything. But I am completely short of breath, and I am just exhausted at this point. Um, One of the things I've had to deal with or acknowledge when I first was diagnosed with neuropathy and I'm always in pain is that at times I'm going to have to use some kind of assistance. And by that I mean either a cane or a walker. And there are many days when I use a cane, and the cane is always with me. I don't always need it, but there's some days when my hip just doesn't want to cooperate and it needs some extra help, so I have to use the cane. There are times when my knees will get so inflamed that it's really hard to walk. And then there are days when I will actually use the walker, and there are not too many of those days, thank goodness, because I'm really not ready for that just yet. But I had to acknowledge the fact that there are days when I'm going to need some kind of walking assistance, so the cane is always there. As far as joint pain is concerned, I experience joint pain pretty much my shoulders, my hands, my hip, my right hip, my knees. Um, my back gets really bad most days, but I manage. It's tolerable on most days. But one of the things that bothered me quite a bit was I don't know if you can notice right now, but my fingers are actually a little swollen. I'm a painter, you could probably tell from all of the equipment behind. So there are times when it's really hard to actually even hold a paintbrush, because there's some days that my fingers just get so swollen and they're so stiff that it's hard to manipulate a paintbrush. But I really do make that a priority, because my art is my life. That's how I make a living. So I have to do what I can, and I have to make myself really um, do the things I love and not push them aside. So as far as physically, the physical limitations that I mentioned, that is another one that I battle with on a daily basis. Usually when I wake up first thing in the morning, my fingers are extremely stiff, and there's this finger that doesn't want to do much. It's very hard to get it into place. It's very stiff, and most of my fingers are like that right now. Like I said, they're a little swollen, but they're not too bad. So, and physical limitations, those are the physical limitations. So what I'm going to be talking about next are the psychological um, and a few other things. Another way that lupus and chronic illness has affected my life is emotionally, psychologically. Um, I was diagnosed with lupus 5 years ago, and for a while I managed to continue working. I think I worked for about a year and a half after I was diagnosed because I loved what I did. I was an art teacher and sculpture teacher, so I loved my job. But it got to a point where I just couldn't go for hours on end working. I would go to work and I would come home at the end of the day and I was just crashing in a recliner. There was I gave everything at school and I had nothing more to give once I got home. All I could do was basically crash in a chair and rest. And it got to a point where after a while I could barely make it through the workday. There were times when I was at the doctor's office, I had to leave school and I was at the ER or I was at urgent care or I just couldn't physically make it through the day. So I spoke to my bosses and my day was made into shorter days where I was coming in and I was teaching my more advanced classes and my other classes were given to we hired another teacher for those so I could keep my more advanced students. And so that was more, I think about 2.5 hours out of for the day. So I come home, I would go to work early in the morning. My classes were usually typically around 8:50 that they would start, and then I would be done just short of lunchtime, which was about 11:20. And then I would come home and I'd be able to rest before my other kids would come home from school. And that went on for about a semester until I physically just couldn't do it. And I ended up having to just stop working altogether. And that was at the end of 2014. So it did affect my job. I ended up having to stop working. And I'm leading up to the emotional part. When you are forced to stop doing the things that you love to do because of illness, you kind of lose a part of yourself because being an art teacher was part of me. It wasn't just a job that I did. I actually enjoyed going to work. I enjoyed being around the kids. I enjoyed teaching them, and many of these kids expressed the fact that they really enjoyed having me as a teacher. So when you lose that part of you, you kind of your self-esteem kind of takes a plunge. When you're not able to do the things you love to do, like paint on a regular basis, your self-esteem takes a plunge. When you're not able to cook on a regular basis for your kids like you're used to, yes, you get extremely depressed. When you're not able to do simple things for yourself and you have to rely on other people, you begin to feel like you're like almost like half a human being. Um, and I got extremely depressed and I consulted a psychiatrist for multiple reasons, but the main reason was I really was kind of losing myself. And I was really down in the dumps. And I didn't really expect illness to have affected me on quite that level. But I did reach out and I got the help that I needed. So emotionally, I was a wreck when it came to dealing with the illness. Now I have learned how to manage it a little better. I do have my strategies of dealing with depression, and I do have people I can speak to. The psychiatrist is always there, but I do also have a strong support group that I can reach out to. whenever I feel that I'm, getting to that point, because I do have days where it is really hard when you're dealing with pain on a regular basis. And so I do have people I can reach out to let them know that, today's a really tough day, and I would kind of need some help, or I would appreciate some help. And so it's emotionally, chronic illness is really tough to deal with, and I'm sure that many of you can relate to that. So obviously, having lost my job, I didn't have an income anymore. So I pretty much, one of the good, and this is a good thing, I pretty much, well, I guess it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. I was kind of forced to live off of my retirement. Unemployment, I didn't qualify for unemployment because they told me, well, since you have a retirement fund, you're pretty much kind of forced to use that up before you qualify for unemployment. And this was kind of strange. And this, I was actually told this. I applied for unemployment, and didn't qualify because they felt that because I've had this, this amount of money put aside, I'm really not that bad off, so that's what I was forced to use. And but so it was a good thing that I did have um the funds and savings, and did have some kind of a retirement plan. The sad part is now that I'm pretty much kind of starting over. But yes, financially, uh, lupus and chronic illness kind of messed up my life. Um, Initially, I wouldn't say it's continuously, but initially it did, because having to stop work because of the illness. At that point, I did not have a job, obviously, so there's no income, and apart from what I had in savings and my retirement account, so that did help, and that is one thing that I stress to a lot of people these days, because I know so many who don't have any kind of a retirement plan. um, you really should consider starting one. You're never too old to start one, in my opinion. So on a job level and the financial level, lupus does mess up your life, and chronic illness in general can mess up your life in that way if you allow it to. Now, financially also, if you do not have medical insurance, you're constantly paying for your medications and whatever else, whatever herbal therapies that you might do, your massages. Those are kind of out of pocket if you do not have medical insurance. And if you do have medical insurance, thank God for it. I have Medicaid right now, but in the few years back, I was paying for everything out of pocket, and it does take a toll on your finances when you have to pay for all of your medications. So, one of the good things, however, about losing your job to lupus or any kind of chronic illness, but for me, that's what it was. It was one illness on top of another, on top of another, and eventually having to stop working. Well, what it did allow me to do was to reevaluate my life. Yes, I wasn't teaching anymore. Physically, I couldn't deal with that constant, those long hours of standing in front of a classroom. However, I did have certain skills, and I was able to use those skills to develop my own business, or to at least um, use it to use it in a way to make money. So shortly after I ended up losing my job, I it took months. This was not an overnight thing, because you have to remember I went through months of depression, of learning how to deal with this illness, and basically not wanting to do anything because it was hard. It was hard physically, it was hard emotionally, it was hard, it was exhausting. I literally felt my life was over. So this was not an overnight thing. But I remember going through my emails one day and I came upon this one email and it intrigued me, but it didn't intrigue me enough to open it right away. So a few days went by and I opened the email, and in it was a message from a particular company, and they discussed how they had been watching my artwork online, and they invited me to become part of this particular company. And basically, I became a designer where I could use my artwork on products that they create and benefit from the sales. So, and I, retained all ownership of the artwork, but the whenever products were ordered with my particular artwork on it, and they're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, different items. And so that was one way that my loss of a job kind of propelled me into what I am doing today. No, I'm not able to completely do everything I used to be able to do before, but I still paint not as often as I wish I could. Another thing that happened was someone else saw my artwork, and this turned out to be a producer, a movie producer. So now a piece of work that I created is being used as a movie poster for a particular film, and I really can't mention the name, but it's being used for a particular film. So there's yes, lupus caused a lot of upheaval, but all of that upheaval came together to create a whole new life for me. Despite all of the pain, despite all of the chaos that lupus caused, despite all just all of the torture, the the hair loss, the weight gain, the um, all of the other issues that lupus caused, including the job loss, it all came together to help to rebuild a life that I'm absolutely beginning to love. Because yes, I miss my students, yes, I miss the teaching, but I love what is happening right now. And as much as many issues as lupus has caused, there's also a plus side to what it has done for me as far as my art and being able to homeschool my son, that sort of thing. So I don't always look at lupus and all of the other illnesses in a negative light, because there is a lot of positivity to what it has done for me. One of the other ways that lupus can affect you is your relationships, whether it be your romantic relationship, the relationships you have with your children, relationships with other family members, with your friends. Lupus does take a toll on those relationships. If you're married, you've probably noticed how difficult it has become, or maybe not. Um, but lupus can take a toll on those kind of romantic relationships. It can take a toll on your friends and family members. I remember when I was first diagnosed and I came home and told my kids, I really didn't come right out. What I did was I brought a DVD, and I brought different pamphlets, and because I knew it was going to be kind of hard to explain to your child, I have lupus, this is what it can do, blah, blah, blah. So I just brought the materials and I said, the material is here for you to sit down and watch. We watch it together, and if you have questions, you feel free to ask, and I will answer them as as well as I can. And anything that I do not know, I will simply try to find out for you. And in the meantime, I also want you to do your own research to educate yourself about what this is. And it seemed like I was doing that all the time because there was always something else that was happening with me. But my kids are now older, um, so it's not so much, they weren't as young back then when I was telling them, I have lupus and all of these other things. They're a little bit older now, But at the same time, I still find myself, I hesitate to always let them know exactly what's going on. And some of you probably feel that way as well, because there are days when I look really good. I can get up and I put on makeup and a nice outfit, and I walk out the door, and no one would think that I'm in any kind of pain. No one would think that I'm sick. No one would look at me and say, there's just no way that you're that sick. I mean, come on, look at you. So there's some days when I hesitate to say anything simply because I really don't look sick. But then there are those days when I get up and it is really obvious something's going on because my eyes are really puffy. There's, the swelling and the rash under here. There's it the physical manifestations are clearly there. So, I'm not feeling well outwardly, physically, you can tell. But there are days when I look really good and you couldn't really tell that I am in tremendous pain. And so I tend to hesitate how much I divulge to people, including my friends and families. There are some really close friends that I do keep in touch with and let them know, okay, this is what's happening today. I could, use a little bit of extra help, whatever the case is, or just an ear for me to scream, for me to yell, to vent, whatever might be happening. And those friends I really, really treasure. I have lost friends since I became ill. That was a little disappointing because they were people who I thought were good friends of mine. So it was a little disappointing when they just kind of vanished. And I don't hold it against them. I understand completely. It just was initially a bit of a shock because um, I did feel isolated. I felt let down. Um, I felt betrayed. Um, and I'm initially it did hurt, but I've gotten to where it's almost like some people would say the universe is kind of fixing things for you, because those friends who knew about my illness and are still here versus the friends who I had back then found out about my illness and vanished, which ones you're supposed to keep. So I guess it was just kind of the universe working in my favor to let me know who was there for me and really who wasn't. As far as a romantic relationship is concerned, um, I have lost. Uh, I shouldn't say lost because we really didn't have. It really didn't get started because right up front I said, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. I've got this illness, and this is what happens from time to time, and I really don't want to bombard that on you, and so I'm letting you know up front. If you can deal with these kind of issues, I would gladly go out with you. However, if you don't think that you can handle these, I will truly understand and I will let you walk away. And the person said, yes, it's no problem. I totally understand. I'm going to be there for you, blah, 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 blah. And this went on, I want to say, a few months. And it came to New Year's, it was New Year's Eve. And I remember it just, you can always tell when just something doesn't feel right because the whole atmosphere, I was having fun, but the individual just didn't seem to be with it, the whole fun part. And I will never forget that night. It was literally 5 minutes past midnight into the new year, and my phone rang. And I was told that, I really don't think I can handle this. And I said, well, what do you mean? So, well, I thought I could, but, you know, I don't think I'm going to be able to handle these kinds of issues. Now, You have to remember, I already had told him, look, I will completely understand if you decide, you don't want a relationship. But he decided yes. So I said, I kind of sensed this was coming. And I'm not exactly hurt that you did it. I'm just kind of hurt that you waited until you left my place, went home, and then placed a phone call. That was the part that bothered me, actually. So having a chronic illness can affect your romantic relationships. You really do have to find someone who is willing to go the distance with you as far as that is concerned. Now, as far as having a social life is concerned, I wouldn't say that it has affected my social life. However, it is not, I really wasn't the type to go out partying and that sort of thing. So it's not really kept me from doing anything that I wanted to do. Now, if I did decide to go out to a function, I have to be very careful not to overexert myself, because then, by come the next day, I'm going to be good for absolutely nothing. So I do have to plan whatever kind of social activities I'm going to be doing throughout either the night or throughout the day, because come the next day, and you probably are familiar with that, taking doing all the fun stuff in one day and taking 5 days to recover from it. So as far as a social life is concerned, I do plan for one, but I don't necessarily overexert myself to the point where I am completely good for nothing for days on end. When it comes to family, extended family, not necessarily just my kids, um, some of them I don't think really understood what I was dealing with. Some of them, they kind of want to sort of kind of brush it aside, and it, one of the big things for me is faith. God is huge for me. God's ability to heal me is huge. I know that for a fact. Um, why it hasn't happened yet, that's between God and, I guess, God. Is when the day that He decides to miraculously heal me, I'm going to be eternally grateful. However, that hasn't happened yet. And some people seem to think it's because maybe I'm not praying enough. Um, maybe I don't call on God enough. I'm not sure, but I guess some family members seem to think that maybe my faith is just not strong enough, and that is why I'm dealing with all of this mess, and maybe that's why I'm not healed. So, as far as the family relationships are concerned, I think that's where the limitation or the issue comes in, is um, on a religious from a religious aspect. I think some of them are thinking that maybe my faith is a little weaker, and I should have been healed already if I've been praying as much as I say I've been praying. Um, so there are several levels, even in the relationships aspect, that lupus and chronic illness can really attack you, uh, from the romantic down to the friendship, the family, and your kids, as well as your extended family. But you have to know that you are doing the best that you can to retain those, to maintain those relationships, and if they're valuable to you, you work on them. If you find that many of the relationships that you have are um, affecting you negatively, then maybe some of those relationships need to go. And you personally have to kind of weed out and decide which ones are the ones you keep, which ones are the ones that you really need to let go. Because when it comes to dealing with a chronic illness, you certainly do not want your tribe to be sucking all of your energy. You do want a tribe around you that's going to be supporting you, not to draining your energy all of the time. So I think I've covered the main aspects that how lupus affects my life. psychologically, financially, physically, relationships wise, planning for a legacy, your job, that sort of thing. If you can think of any other aspects that I might have missed, please feel free to comment below. And also, please feel free to comment with how it's affected you. If you are following this challenge and if you are doing the challenge yourself and you have a YouTube channel, please post your link so that I can go over and subscribe to you. I would also really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel and also follow me throughout the next 28 days so that we can kind of have a conversation going here about lupus and chronic illness and the way it affects our lives, and all of the different discussions that we'll be having. I really appreciate you being here with me, and I really appreciate the conversations that we're going to be having, and I look forward to seeing you on my next video. Talk to you soon. Thank you.